Three, two, one. Hey, welcome to a new edition of Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. The show streaming live, as always, for free at hockeyprimetime.com. My name is Conor McKenna. I'm the host of the show, and it's nice to be back with you. Happy New Year. Right? That's right. Yeah, it was December 30th last time we spoke. We haven't spoken since last year. A happy New Year. All the best to you and yours. I hope you're having a good holiday season. Is the holiday season over? Do we officially know what? When does it begin? When does it end? I threw out my Christmas tree. They came by with a wood chipper to take care of my Christmas tree. So I guess maybe the holiday season's over. Either way, I hope it was a good one for you. And Laura Saba is back with us after being away for the last couple of weeks and missing out on the lovely Montreal weather that we've had lately. How you doing, Laura?
I'm good. Thank you, Connor. It's been a while. I've missed being on the show. I have not missed this weather.
No, and it's only going to get worse. Bad news, right? January is bad. February is usually worse, and March is underratedly awful in Montreal as well. And this year we haven't even had the reprieve that the Canadiens provide by playing decent hockey at least every once in a while, although we were treated to a pretty good game the other night against the Tampa Bay Lightning. But yeah, Montrealers, I think what's happened here in the city, and this was after last week's show. I actually went downtown to meet a friend, and it was on a Saturday night, and granted, minus 30 with the wind chill. I'm talking Celsius, not Fahrenheit. And I could not believe we went to Ye Olde Orchard pub downtown on Mountain Street. And hadn't been there for a while, but I've been there on game nights before. The Canadiens were on the road in Florida taking on the Panthers, and it was an awful, awful game. But I was going with a buddy of mine, and we were talking on the way there. He was saying, what do you think it's going to be like? It's going to be hard to get a seat, a place to sit down and hang out. I was like, I don't know what to expect. And we walked in, and the place was dead. Like, there was nobody there. And this place used to be on game nights. They'd have the projector screen down. They had a giveaway for road games. They would give away tickets to the next home game to one of the people at the pub. It was a whole big thing. And it really was a sort of, I think, an indication of what's going on with the Canadiens, is that not only are people, they've gone from being angry to not caring. And that's a very, very dangerous thing for an organization to be dealing with, is the apathy of a fan base. All of a sudden, the Canadiens are not a hot ticket. And in fact, I think most people would rather not go to see a Canadiens game live. And it looks like they'd rather not go out to the pub and watch the game either. I guess they want to feel the shame and the comfort of their own homes of watching them. Or maybe they just don't want to watch them at all. Which I've said before, there's been times that I've felt like if it wasn't my job to watch these games, I don't know if I would be watching these games. And it breaks your heart even more if you're a hockey fan who's just a fan of the game. And I know that's most of the people listening. They're fans of hockey. They're not just fans of one team in particular. But in Montreal, it seems like maybe even more than in other places. They're fans of the Canadiens, but they're not fans of hockey. This is not a market where a lot of people watch out-of-market games, and I love watching out-of-market games. I mean, it's the only thing I do enjoy watching.
Right.
And it's the hockey is good. I've said this in this space before, and I'll say it again. The hockey this year in general is really good. It's super entertaining, super fun to watch. The caliber is really, really high. And then you watch a Canadiens game, and you wouldn't know it.
Right.
For the most part. However, on Thursday night, we got a little taste of what this team actually seems to be capable of when everything comes together. And I know they don't have Shea Weber, but listen, every team deals with injuries. Not an excuse I'm really willing to listen to for how badly they've played and how boring their games have been. Just a chore to watch. But this is what the Canadiens were supposed to be. This is what, and I'm not angry that they made me look bad in my prediction. The Canadiens aren't making the playoffs. It's not going to happen. It's over. And even if they get an Andrew Hammond style run, it's still, in all likelihood, not going to happen. It's basically a 99% chance that they will not make the playoffs this year. And there is that slim little 1% chance, but still. But it's almost more frustrating because of how good that game was on Thursday night, because you get a taste of, oh, look at this. They can come up with a really solid effort. Max Pacioretty had a good quote after the game saying, that was the most fun he's had since he can remember playing hockey. It was the best game of the season for the Canadians. And for those of you who didn't watch the game, I'm sure there are many. Thursday night at the Bell Center in Montreal, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the top team in the NHL, comes to town. A little bit of a rivalry. It's a division game, and they faced each other in the playoffs twice in the last, I'm going to say 5 years, 4 or 5 years, right?
Years.
So there should be anyway, the semblance of a rivalry there. And it felt like it. It felt like the game of the year, and it was from the Canadian standpoint. They all are. Tampa, I don't think they had a 24-point lead over Montreal. 24-point lead over Montreal going into that game. And the Canadians played them great. I mean, they went toe-to-toe. It wasn't just that Carey Price bailed them out. Price and Vasilevsky went toe-to-toe. Great goaltending matchup and just a highly entertaining hockey game. 1-1 the whole way through. Max Pacioretty, and the best scorer in hockey, Nikita Kucherov, scored the goals within 40 seconds or so of one another. And then the goalies went at it right up until the shootout. And if you haven't seen it already, Carey Price made, well, you can say this, the best save of the year so far. But, it is only the, I don't even know what it is, the 6th?
Yeah, it's the 6th of January.
Is it the 5th?
It's the 6th.
It's the 6th. Thank you, Laura. So it's the 6th of January, and that was the save of the year in overtime on Andre Palat, right after stopping Tyler Johnson with a circus stop right before that. Just an amazing, sort of incredible bit of acrobatics, sort of rolling over on his back, but you can watch Price's eyes in the situation. Price has his eyes on the puck the entire time, even when he's rolling over backwards on his back, almost Dominic Hasek style.
Yeah.
And getting the leg out there in an unorthodox, but kind of it was like a breakdancing move, almost just an amazing save. And Price very quietly has raised his save percentage now to .910 after being in the .890 range and quite a lot worse than that in the early stages of this season. .910, how high can he get it? Does he have enough time to get it up to .920 by the end of the season? Either way, we know this. If Carey Price does not do what he did in that game, and that is stop everything except one shot he's still looking for from Nikita Kucherov, the Canadians are going to lose the game because this team cannot score goals. They are as bad as the worst teams in the NHL. And Price is keeping them in games. Night in, night out, Carey Price keeps them in games, although the San Jose game might have been an exception, but they just can't score. They can't score in the power play. They can't score at even strength. They can't score shorthanded. They just cannot score goals. And it's the same old story with this team. And I really do get the sense that the fan base has now fully and is ready to turn the lights out on Marc Bergevin as the general manager of the team. Many people are talking about Julien Brisebois to go back to the Tampa Bay Lightning. He was in town the other day, assistant general manager, assistant to Steve Yzerman. And maybe that is the guy who's the next GM of the team, but we don't know. This is the thing too, right? The grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. And the simple fact is we don't know who Julien Brisebois is. Now, I floated this guy's name like 6 weeks ago before it was cool to talk about Julien Brisebois. I was talking about this guy as the GM, but he's not a proven commodity. He's been an assistant general manager. He's been a capologist, but he has not been the general manager of a hockey team. That's a serious job. And as Marc Bergevin has shown us, it's not one that everybody can do. So if it is Brisebois, we'll see, but it's not going to be until the offseason, right? I mean, you don't hire an assistant general manager from a team in the middle of a season. At least I don't think that's something that happens. So that's the thing. I don't think Marc Bergevin is going anywhere, at least until the offseason. And maybe then, thought about this too, the Shea Weber injury. He got injured on opening night. He played hurt for 6 weeks. He's now been out for a couple of weeks, and he'll be out for a couple more. I think I could easily envision a scenario where at the end of season press conference, they're talking about how Shea Weber's injury knocked their season off the rails, which would be a complete fabrication and completely unfair and untrue. They were absolute horse spit when Shea Weber was playing. But still, I could see them doing that. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Bergevin is gone. So talking about who's going to replace him might be a little premature at this point. But yeah, wow, what a game on Thursday night. Tampa was fantastic. Max Pacioretty played his best game of the season. When was the last time you watched a Canadiens game and Max Pacioretty was the best player on the ice? He was the best player out there for Montreal, which hasn't happened. I mean, he's looked lost. He's looked despondent for long stretches of time this year, but He played like nobody was watching the other night, and really, really looked good doing it. And the fans got into it. As negative and angry as the fan base has been, they showed us on Thursday night that if they get what they believe to be an honest and respectable effort out of their team, they will support their team. They were loud, they were boisterous, and they supported the Canadians in what was a terrific game. Mikhail Sergachev comes back to Montreal. He had a few impressive sort of end-to-end rushes and showed a little bit some of the flashes of what he can do. He skates so well. He's got the size. I mean, him and Hedman, good Lord, twin towers on those first and second pairing for a long time. But defensive shortcomings. I mean, he and we saw it. He put the puck on Pacioretty's stick to lead to that first Montreal goal. But the fact is, and I talked about how frustrating it is, right? Because if Montreal just played the way they did against San Jose, a 4-1 loss on Tuesday every night, then I think people would just accept it and be like, well, yeah, it's a lottery team, like Buffalo or Arizona or whatever, like a bad team. You just come to sort of expect it. But when you get an effort like that against a team like Tampa, it just sort of reminds you that, yeah, I mean, they do have personnel that should be able of delivering the occasional win. And it just doesn't seem to happen that way. It's very strange to see the team that went toe-to-toe with Tampa on Thursday night and think that that's the same team that was so poor and just looked disinterested against San Jose earlier in the week. So anyway, what I'm saying is don't believe the hype.
I do think, though, that, if the Canadians were still losing as much as they were, but putting together efforts like they were on like the night against Tampa, it would at least be exciting hockey. It's not just that they're losing. It's that it seems like they don't even care, and it feels like they can't put anything together. So, I wouldn't blame the fans for turning their backs.
Not at all.
If the Habs are not invested, then why would the fans be invested?
The fans don't owe them a damn thing.
Exactly.
If the fans are buying tickets and they show up to the rink, I'm a firm believer in this. Do whatever you want. If you want to boo, then boo. If you want to yell, then yell. Nobody should tell a paying customer how to behave as long as they do it within obvious reasonable parameters and within the rule of law. But hey, who knows what might happen if you buy tickets to a hockey game, you buy tickets to a World Junior game, the gold medal game. Maybe you'll end up with a silver medal in your hands, right? I mean, just be careful. I don't want to get hit in the head with a silver medal. Keep your head up. What was it? Elias Pettersson tossing away his medal. Is he the captain of the captain of the Swedish team, tossing, and a Vancouver Canucks prospect tossing
Rangers prospect.
Rangers,
Rangers,
okay.
yeah. And I know this because my friend has season tickets to the Rangers, and he said he's very excited for him to play for the Rangers, but his seats are really close to the glass, so he's a little bit worried about getting hit with stuff.
Well, there's no medals. There's no medals in the National Hockey League, right? And Max Pacioretty had a good quote about this. To go back to Pacioretty earlier today, and he said he loved it. The kid, and to paint you a picture, he wins a silver medal. I mean, wins may not be the right word, but he's awarded a silver medal after losing to Canada in the gold medal game of the World Juniors yesterday. And he tosses it away, tosses it off into the crowd. And I think a lot of people were saying, oh, it's disrespectful. And hey, that's fine. I mean, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I love stuff like this because it is kind of divisive. But what Pacioretty said, I think resonates. He said, they don't give you a silver medal when you lose in the Stanley Cup final. Right. I don't see how this is any different. I mean, who wants that silver medal? It's a reminder. Is it not sort of in a way a reminder of the fact that you failed?
So close.
Hey, you failed. You lost.
Yeah.
You had a chance to win gold and you lost. It's different, I think, in an individual sport even, right? But in a team sport, you played for the gold medal. You did not win. Here is the thing that will now remind you of that fact for the rest of your life. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to silver medalists. I'm just trying to put myself in the head of this kid. And I think that Pacioretty made a good point. No Canadians game tonight. Kind of a weird day in the NHL. We've already got a game in the books. The Flyers beating the Blues earlier today. Only 8 more games, and we've got one of them going on right now as we speak. The Stars are all over the Edmonton Oilers. So we'll keep you posted as the results come in. But what we are going to do is check in with many guests throughout the course of the show today, starting with Adam Gretz. Adam's with the NHL and NBC Sports. We're going to talk a little bit about the Penguins. What are they, the 6th place Penguins? What's going on here? Are they done? We'll talk to Adam Gretz about the Penguins and more coming up next. Stick around. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio, and we're also streaming the show live at hockeyprimetime.com. You can watch the video stream on Facebook Live, on YouTube Live, on Periscope, and probably on other stuff that I'm forgetting. So stick around. We'll be back right after this.
Adam is on the line.
Thanks. 3, 2, 1. Hey, welcome back. This is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio, streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. You can find old episodes, old segments at hockeyprimetime.com as well. Take a look at our website, and you can hear all kinds of frozen cold takes and some hot ones there as well. My name is Conor McKenna. I am the host of the show. Laura Saba is the producer of the program. We're with you until 7 o'clock tonight, and we'll turn it over to live coverage of the National Hockey League at that point. But right now, let's talk about a team that, are they still trying to figure it out? We're more than halfway through the season. The Pittsburgh Penguins did get a win yesterday, but they are struggling right now. The two-time defending Stanley Cup champions are currently outside of a playoff spot. And, the window's closing, right? But then again, you do have teams in front of them slipping a little bit. Are we ready to count them out just yet? They're 6th in the Metropolitan Division. That does feel weird to say. With more on that, and to go around the National Hockey League, we welcome back to the show from the NHL on NBC Sports, Adam Gretz. Adam, how are you?
I'm doing great, Connor. How are you today?
I'm doing all right, and I am curious about this Penguins team, who I know there was those blowouts and back-to-backs early in the season, but I think a lot of us keep sort of waiting for them to get their act together, and every time it looks like maybe they have done, they haven't, and they take a step backwards. I mean, that was an impressive win over the Islanders yesterday, but here they are. They're still behind Carolina, the Rangers, Columbus, Jersey, and Washington. Is this who this team is? Are they just not good?
It's, you're halfway through the season at this point. You have a pretty big body of work there in front of you. That's the way it's starting to look. And they've had, maybe over the past month and a half, they've had the occasional game where they've come out and they've played like they did last night against the Islanders, where they look like the Penguins again. They look like a team that can play the way they played the past 2 seasons, and you think, okay, maybe this is the game where the floodgates open, this is the game where they turn it around, and then they come out the next game and they just fall flat. I mean, that game they played against Carolina the other night that was probably one of the worst games they've played in 2-3 years. They had a game like that right before Christmas against Anaheim, where they just looked totally outmatched, and that's been happening so many times this season. And you look at the players they lost this offseason. They lost a lot of really key depth guys like Nick Bonino and Matt Cullen, guys that could play up and down your lineup. Chris Kunitz, the guy that you could have him on the fourth line, you could have him on the first line, never seemed out of place, and they didn't really replace those guys. I mean, they lost a big chunk of that team, and the only thing they really did over the offseason was bring in Ryan Reeves and Matt Hunwick, and that just has not been enough. They got a little bit of a spark last night from Daniel Sprong. Maybe he can give them some of that life that some of the young guys in recent years have given them. But right now, they're just looking like a team that is really inconsistent. And like I said, it's halfway through the year. You got a big body of work there to show what you are.
And you just checked off a long list of key components on 2 Stanley Cup teams, or at least 1 Stanley Cup team in all of those cases. And I don't believe you mentioned the name of Marc-Andre Fleury, who was huge for them last year, right? And not just in the regular season, but in the playoffs as well. And, whether you're a big believer in intangibles or not, a guy who is certainly very well liked and a veteran of 3 Stanley Cup championships in that locker room. I mean, how much are they missing him?
Well, I think where they're missing him is, this is kind of one of the storylines that's kind of been overlooked a bit this season, is that Matt Murray struggled a little bit. He has not played at the same level that he played at the past 2 years, and you don't really have, or until recently, they really haven't had that guy that could step in and kind of relieve him a little bit, give him a break, because they opened the year with Antti Niemi, and that experiment just totally failed. And then they kind of just bounced around with some different guys. Now they have Tristan Jarry up here, one of their other young goaltenders, who has played really well. He played so well in his past 2 starts. I think they should give him another start tomorrow night against Boston. But yeah, Matt Murray struggled a little bit this year, and they haven't had that other goalie that can step in and pick up that slack a little bit. With Marc-Andre Fleury, you had a really solid top half of the league goaltender that was extremely durable for more than 10 years. That is a really valuable asset, and that's a tough thing to replace.
We're talking to Adam Gretz, the Pittsburgh Penguins. are sixth in the Metropolitan Division as it stands right now, and as Adam just told us, they're facing the Bruins tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. It's a light schedule in the National Hockey League tonight. The Penguins, one of many teams, 13 teams that are not playing in today's NHL action. The division I'm curious about, because the Metropolitan Division, I mean, is clearly stacked. And the fact that the Devils have been as good as they have, for example, has thrown sort of another curveball. We knew it was going to be a good division, but it's been even better, I think, than some expected. How much can we also chalk up to, or what part of their struggles can we chalk up to the fact that their division, as any division will do around a Stanley Cup winner, it's an arms race? I mean, it just seems like the division keeps getting better. How much of a factor is that, do you think?
Well, and that's kind of one of the things I think a lot of people in Pittsburgh are clinging to right now, is that they have a ton of games against their division left, that they can still make up a lot of ground there pretty quickly if they can get wins in those games. But like you said, everybody in the division has just stacked themselves. I think Columbus is a lot better than they've played recently. I think that's a team that's going to be a force. The Rangers, as long as Henrik Lundqvist, you can never count them out. And then you have teams like New Jersey and Carolina that are suddenly a lot better. New Jersey looks like they are going to be a playoff team this season. Carolina, if they could just ever figure out that goaltending situation, they just are so frustratingly close every season, and they just keep missing that one component. That game they played against Pittsburgh the other night, and the game in Carolina about a week earlier, they looked pretty outstanding, and they did to the Penguins what the Penguins did to a lot of teams the past 2 years, where they were just blowing past them, skating circles around them. That's a really intriguing team right there. And if they could just ever get that goaltending situation figured out, I think they could really do some damage. They have that great young defense. They have a lot of really talented young forwards. Sebastian Aho is just a fantastic player to watch. I think Jeff Skinner is one of the more underappreciated players in the league. But yeah, just everybody in the division is good right now. And it's a tough division to make up ground and get into that type of hole because everybody's so good.
It's true, and that's it, right? You talk about all those division games, and look, I mean, the other side of this is, what do they have? They've got 39 games left, the Penguins. They've played so many games. Like, they've not only played so many games, as has been mentioned time and time again in the last couple of years with those Stanley Cup runs that they've gone on. I mean, I know that does take a toll, but they've also played more games than certainly any team in the Eastern Conference, and possibly more. Yeah, St. Louis has played more than them, and I think that's it in the NHL. So they've played a lot of games this year too. I know that's another thing that gets brought up a lot, but how valid is it? And I know that you recently sort of looked at historical trends when it comes to teams that play a lot of playoff games over a couple of years. How valid of an excuse is it that they've just stacked so many games in the last couple of years?
I think there's some element to that. It's not even so much just like the physical factor. I think it's a mental grind as well, because, I was talking about this in the press box the other night with somebody. When you've been playing Stanley Cup final games for the past 2 years, you've been playing all these big games, it can sometimes be tough to get yourself back up ready to go for a mid-January game against the Carolina Hurricanes. It's not the same intensity for a lot of those guys. I think there is an element to that, but I still think when you look at teams, and they're not the first team that's played in back-to-back Stanley Cup finals in recent years. There's a lot of teams that have done it. They may have been the first to win back-to-back in a long time, but a lot of teams have played in back-to-back finals. They did it back in 07 and 08. The Red Wings have done it a couple times. The Stars did it about a decade ago. The Devils have done it. None of those teams have come back the third year and fallen off the way the Penguins have. I still think a lot of it comes down to the fact that they just lost too many guys that they never replaced. And I think that's kind of getting caught up in the salary cap league, where you can't pay Nick Bonino $5 million a year, no matter how much you want to keep him. Matt Cullen obviously had some personal connections to Minnesota. He wanted to go back there. There's not much you can do about that. It's just a lot. And then you have the expansion draft, where you have really no choice, but you have to give away your franchise goalie for the past decade. I think that's the stuff that is hurting them the most right now, more so than the number of games they've played, more so than the schedule. I just think they lost too much talent, and they haven't replaced it well enough.
And looking at the Devils, I'm curious as to where you stand on this. Like, I think like most of us, right? I mean, you've been at the very least a little bit surprised by how well things have gone for them, but it appears that they're turning into pumpkins a little bit right now. What do you think? Are you thinking they can hang on? There's still 42 games to go for them. I know they're in second place. They've been excellent, but do you think that they are actually good enough to hang on and be a top 3 or even a top 5 team in the Metro?
I think they are. I think they've built themselves enough of a cushion that they have some leeway there, that even if they do fall back a little bit, don't maintain that pace they had early on, they should still be all right. The thing that I think is encouraging about that Devils team is they're getting so many contributions from young players. They have a really nice young core of talent now, and Taylor Hall has taken a big step forward from where he was in year one. I know the Devils wanted to see more from him. He's been outstanding for them, and a lot of those young guys are starting to come along, and that's kind of what they've been lacking for the past years. They haven't really had a young nucleus of forwards that could take over a game or be game-changing players, and they're starting to get that now. And it's definitely a more exciting team than we've seen in recent years. And I don't know if they're going to maintain the same pace they had early on, but I still think they're going to be a playoff team this year. And I think they're going to be around for a while. That's a really good young core there.
All right. So, yeah, another good-looking up-and-coming team, a lot like Carolina, who you mentioned. It does appear that the future is bright for those teams. And, I mean, there's just a lot of quality in that division. I envy you that you get to watch as many games in that division, because I'm watching a lot of Atlantic Division, and it's just not that good. It really isn't. It's crazy how bad it is, to be honest with you.
Everybody else.
Yeah. Hey, Adam, thanks for your time, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. Anytime.
That's Adam Gretz, NHL and NBC Sports, based in Pittsburgh, covering the Penguins. And you can also read his work with FanRag and also the Sporting News, NHL department as well. What do we have coming up? I am going to have to get to this at some point. Maybe we'll do it at the end of this hour. But the story about the Taylor Hall trade to the Ottawa Senators that never happened. Are you aware of that? This one popped up just the other day. Man, oh man, Peter Chiarelli, as a lot like Marc Bergevin, has been saved from himself on more than one occasion. Actually, I can remember an occasion, I should say, where Peter Chiarelli saved Marc Bergevin from himself. Anyway, we'll get to that story before the hour is up. But coming up next, let's talk Tampa Bay Lightning, the top team in the NHL, with Erik Erlendsson of LightningInsider.com. Erik's next on Hockey Primetime. Hey, welcome back. This is Hockey Primetime. Happy Saturday to you. I hope you're having a good one so far. My name is Conor McKenna, with you until 7 o'clock tonight. And plenty of games are on the NHL schedule. Only 7 more after the one that's in progress right now. And if you haven't seen the highlight already, butt fumble, eat your heart out. We have a butt goal in the National Hockey League in the St. Louis-Philadelphia game. The return, not so triumphant return of Braden Shen to Philadelphia. Anyway, you probably will see the highlight at one point. It's not quite or even close to being as embarrassing as the infamous Mark Sanchez butt fumble in the National Football League all those years ago, of which I will say, as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure this happened, that I read an oral history of the butt fumble, and it was amazing. It was super funny and super great. That was one of the more fun things I've read in the last 6 weeks or so. Speaking of reading, you can do that if you're a Tampa Bay Lightning fan at my next guest's website. It's lightninginsider.com, and he is currently covering the best team in the National Hockey League through the first half of the season. His name is Erik Erlendsson. He's been on the Tampa Bay Lightning beat for a long, long time. Erik, how you doing?
I'm good, Connor. How are you, man?
I'm doing well, and that was a lot of fun the other night at the Bell Center. The Tampa Bay Lightning came to town, and, geez, the Canadians have had such a bad year, Erik. What a study in contrast. I've thought of this, really, with the Lightning being such a well-run organization and really a team on the rise, but a team that's faced the Canadians, right? I mean, they've been duking it out for the division the last couple of years. They've met in the playoffs a couple of times in the last few years, and then, well, I mean, how the mighty have fallen, I guess you could say, while the Lightning have just been on the rise. It's been fun, hasn't it? I would imagine, and an entertaining hockey team to watch this year.
Yeah, this year for sure. They're back to that up-tempo style that they used in 2015 to get to the Stanley Cup final. There's a little not quite as up-tempo, but they're back to being aggressive on a forecheck and making sure their D are up in the play, and that's reflected in the amount of offense that they've gotten from their blue line this year. They didn't get a lot of it last year, and I think that's one of the things they really tweaked in their system this year, was to make sure their D were up, make sure they were involved. Obviously, you have to have the trust of your forwards if you're a D-man to make that push, especially along the walls. But they're so active in the rush. I mean, Victor Hedman so often is part of the rush. Now you got Mikhail Sergachev so often a part of that rush. Even Anton Strawman gets up there. We've seen Dan Girardi get up there. He scored a couple of goals and been around that area a couple of times as well. So to me, that's the big difference between this team this year, is they're more aggressive with their forecheck than maybe last year, and their D are much more aggressive.
Yes, of course, we all know about the offensive dynamo Dan Girardi. Things are going well when Dan Girardi is pinching in and scoring goals. Definitely not why they signed him, but yeah, it seems like everything is just coming up aces for Steve Yzerman. I look at the moves he made in this offseason. Certainly took a risk trading Jonathan Drouin. I know Mikhail Sergachev, a highly regarded player, but I don't know if anybody could have anticipated the level of success he's had so far this year, except maybe Yzerman and his deputies. But he's been on a run, hasn't he? I'd say, for my money, he's probably the best general manager in the National Hockey League. Well, what's your feel for that?
Yeah, you look at the moves he's made, and the way that he's been able to massage the salary cap. I mean, last year, finding a way to trade Valtteri Filppula and free up $5 million on his contract this year, making the move with Vegas to ensure that the Golden Knights took Jason Garrison and his $4.5 million contract that opened up so much space. You make a move like trading Jonathan Drouin for Mikhail Sergachev, and obviously it's a hockey trade, but it's a contract trade as well. Drouin was a restricted free agent, needed a new deal. Sergachev in, so you've got that contract control on an entry level for 3 seasons. And to be honest with you, I don't even think the Lightning expected this kind of production from Mikhail Sergachev this year. In fact, I know they didn't, because part of the condition of that trade was that conditional second-round pick if Sergachev didn't play 40 games. Obviously, that's going to hit. Actually, that hit the other night. So that condition is null and void. But that's why that condition was put in. They weren't sure if he was going to be able to come in and have the impact he has. And he's really settled so many things and slotted so many things right on that blue line.
And I'd be curious to know what you think, because I think we saw everything that Sergachev can do in that game the other night. I know we didn't end up with any points, nor really any scoring chances, but we saw end-to-end rushes. We saw all kinds of offensive flair. We saw him crush Brendan Gallagher with a hit that hurt him. This is a guy who can throw his weight around and doesn't mind doing it. I know that from having watched him as he was coming up after being drafted by the Canadiens. But we also saw the other side, and that is not a perfect defensive game. And what 19-year-old does play a perfect defensive game? But really, he had more time than he thought he did. He ends up putting the puck right onto Max Pacioretty's stick, and even Pacioretty, who's struggled mightily this season, isn't going to miss in a situation like that. Is that pretty much it, though? I mean, if we're talking about what he needs to work on, and I guess this is kind of always what it is, whether it's forwards or defensemen, it's the defensive side of the game, if there is a deficiency right now, isn't it?
Yeah, especially at that age. You know, he's coming in, and you know, you talk about he didn't understand how much time he really had to make that play that led to Montreal's goal in that game. You know, that's going to come through experience, and that's just going to come through, you know, learning the league and understanding that. And that's the area. If you look at his ice time, like the point totals are obviously there. You see the offensive skills. I mean, he's a magician with the puck at the blue line. I haven't seen a kid at that age, at that position, make the moves that he has, have the confidence to make the moves he has at the blue line that he does. That is the reason he was drafted, you know, so high and such a highly regarded prospect. So yes, he has to learn the other end. His ice time is 14, 15 minutes a night, most nights. I think he was up around 19 the other night against Montreal. But that's where he has to learn, and that you can only do that through experience. And the good thing with what they have and the way that things are broken down this year, he gets to play with Anton Strawman, who is about as steady and reliable as they come in this league in terms of the way that he can play. So he's there. He's a perfect partner for a guy like Sergachev to come in and learn from and be paired with. And, you know, so those things are going to come for Sergachev. He's already got a man's body. That's just at 6'3", about 200 pounds. He already, you know, has that in him. So it's just learning the game and understanding it. And once he does and he starts to play 20 to 22 minutes a night, I can imagine the point totals are going to come with it.
And maybe the hardware as well, although he might be having to duke it out with one of his teammates, Victor Hedman, who I think a lot of people right now have at the top of their Norris ballots. And it seems like he's been around forever, and I guess he has, but he's only 27 years old, Hedman. What do you think? Is this the year that he steps out of the shadow? You look at the seasons. It seems like the time is right. Erik Karlsson's having a tough time. The Senators are struggling. Brent Burns has been better, but he also had a tough start to the season and hasn't been a Norris caliber guy. Is this the year that Victor Hedman finally wins the Norris Trophy?
I think if things keep going the way they are, I think he's going to have to be considered the favorite for it. I know PK Subban's having a great year in Nashville again. I think it's kind of gone overlooked with the success that Nashville's had, but Subban's having a great year. I know Pietrangelo has kind of tailed off a little bit here for St. Louis. So, yeah, I think because of the things you mentioned with Brent Burns and Erik Karlsson, this might be the year. I mean, you look up, I didn't even realize this until I looked it up the other day. Victor Hedman's like tied for third in points among defensemen. That kind of snuck up on me because actually Sergachev had been leading the team from defensive scoring for most of the year, and Victor Hedman's kind of turned it up. So as long as that continues, I think that this is probably going to be the year he kind of gets that breakthrough.
It is. It's amazing that, and you mentioned Sergachev's point totals, that he still does have, not only does he have more points than Jonathan Drouin, which I don't know how many of us expected that, he's got more points than any player on the Montreal Canadiens roster at 19 years old, and he's only playing 14, 15 minutes a game. I mean, it's a good asset management, right? It's putting the kid in a position to succeed, and that's what they're doing. And it just seems like this organization, to go back, and I know that you can read Erica writing about some of these kids at lightninginsider.com. The prospects for this organization, if you're watching the World Junior Championships, every game, it seems like you've got 3, 4, 5 Tampa Bay Lightning prospects. And I know that's not in and of itself a measure of drafting success, but it's got to mean something. How is it that they've done such a good job in the draft, continually finding the kind of kids who play in World Junior Championships?
First of all, you didn't make too many friends in Montreal by pointing out that Sergachev has more points than anybody on the Canadian roster. But you know, Al Murray, you know, he was with Hockey Canada for a number of years. He was responsible for a lot of the top Kings players, the Dustin Browns, the Anze Kopitars, Jonathan Quicks. You know, he was with the Kings during that time. He's the guy that I think gets a lot of credit here because he's in charge of the scouting department. They're able to find guys like Andre Palat in the 7th round. They're able to draft Braden Point in the 3rd round. And then, you know, you look at the World. I mean, they had 4 players on Canada's World Junior roster this year. They had 5 players on Canada's World Junior roster last year. They had Libor Hadjic, who was a force for the Czech blue line at the World Juniors this year. They just seem to find a way to find this talent. And that's what's going to kind of keep this organization so relevant for years down the road, because even looking at like this year, as well as they are, I think Steve Yzerman is going to make a big splash come the trade deadline. And he's got the prospects and he's got the assets to be able to pull it off. So not only can that help now, that's going to help you down the line and keep that kind of pipeline sort of flowing. And you know, with this organization, there's always more prospects coming. You know, Syracuse this year had a 10-game winning streak, and it's just as their first-year players, the Anthony Sorellis, the Matthew Josephs, those type of players that have kind of found their way as first-year pros, and they've really helped push Syracuse towards the top of the AHL in their division.
They've got about $4 million in current cap space. In true cap space right now, it's closer to $2 million, but that number grows as the season goes on. Here's a scenario for you, Erik, and of course, this may sound a little bit crazy, but you talk about making a splash at the trade deadline. There's a lot of Max Pacioretty trade rumors. He only makes $4.5 million per season. I mean, can you envision a scenario where Steve Yzerman commits robbery and steals Max Pacioretty away from the Canadiens?
Yeah, that possibility is always certainly there. I mean, that's, you know, I know that they've been on the lookout for a top 9 forward. I think the area he really liked to address though was on the back end. You know, there are some question marks on their defense. You know, Jake Dotchin hasn't even been in the NHL a full year now, even though he's paired with Victor Hedman. You know, you don't know what you're still going to get out of Sergachev here as the games kind of tighten up down the second half of the year. So to me, there's some question marks there. I think they'd like to bring in some experience. I know it's not easy to pull off those type of deals for basically a top 4 D-man, but I think that's the first priority for this team. But second, it's probably a top 9 forward, and certainly Pacioretty is somebody who could fit the bill if the deal is right.
And yeah, help on the blue line. Something else I wanted to ask you about is Julien Brisebois, who's the assistant general manager or an assistant general manager there in Tampa. A lot of folks in Montreal are talking about him these days as Marc Bergevin's days starting to maybe look a little more numbered than they have in the past. And we know that Montreal only hires French-speaking guys to be general managers or coaches. What do you think of Brisebois as a candidate to be a general manager someday anywhere, let alone Montreal?
Yeah, I think he's going to be. You know, he did interview for the Pittsburgh job before Jim Rutherford took it over a couple of years ago. His name pops up every time there's a general manager opening. If you look at the success he's had in building the Lightning's minor league team, you know, since Tampa's had an affiliation under Yzerman's group, they've won a Calder Cup with Norfolk. Then they've been to 2 other Calder Cup finals since then. And Julien Brisebois is a big part of that. He brings in guys like Yanni Gourde. He brings in guys like Jonathan Marchessault, who are not castaways, but kind of given up on by other organizations, and brings them in. So he can find talent as well and bring them in. And, you know, he was a big supporter of hiring John Cooper for their minor league team back when they joined the affiliation. So obviously he knows the CBA inside and out. He is the go-to guy when it comes to CBA-related issues. You know, and he's got the talent guy. He's got the ability to kind of find that talent, and he'll surround himself no matter where he gets hired with others who can do the same thing. So, yeah, I think Julien Brisebois eventually is going to be a general manager in this league.
Well, here's hoping it's here in Montreal and not somewhere else. Hey, Erik, a pleasure as always to check in with you, my friend. Thank you for making time for us here today. Check out lightninginsider.com. Happy New Year, Erik. Cheers.
Same to you, Connor. I appreciate it.
That's Erik Erlendsson. I'm Conor McKenna. This is Hockey Primetime. We're back in just a few moments. We'll wrap up the first hour of the program. Don't miss an entire jam-packed second hour. We'll have 3 guests in the second hour. No guests coming up next, but one thing I do want to talk about. Yes, I know that my story of the year, my worst story of the year in hockey was that the NHL is not going to the Olympics. But let's pretend that they are. What would the Olympic rosters look like if teams were sending NHL players to South Korea for the Olympics? So we'll explore that question next. This is Hockey Primetime here on SiriusXM, NHL Network Radio, and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. 2, 1. Hey, welcome back. This is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio, streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. Thanks for joining us and making us a part of your Saturday evening. Plenty of games coming up in the National Hockey League. A busy night ahead, although not that busy by Saturday night standards. I don't know if they're taking a step back, showing a little respect to the National Football League, who are playing their wild card weekend. The first 2 games today, 2 more tomorrow. But you've got 2 games in the books already. Stars beat the Oilers 5-1 earlier today, as Radulov, Sagan, and Ben, the big 3, all scored goals. And how about John Klingberg? Although we were talking Norris candidates in the last segment, his name didn't come up, but he's been outstanding this year for Dallas. A real bounce back season for him and that organization. They're on pace for roughly a 100-point season and a playoff spot this year. The Flyers have beat the Blues earlier today. Sean Couturier had himself a day with 2 goals. He's got 21 on the season, and what a breakout year he's having for the Flyers. Wanted to talk about the Olympics, so we've got a couple of minutes to do so. Now, I've got bad news for you. If you've just come out of a fallout shelter where you've been living for the last several months and you didn't know, I've got bad news for you. The NHL is not going to the Olympics next month, which certainly makes me a lot less excited about the Olympic tournament. I know a lot of people are talking about it. Oh, the Olympic hockey tournament, who's going to be there? And Brian Giunta and James Wisniewski, like, oh, come on, like, who cares? Anyway, the American roster, what would it look like? What would this U.S. roster, just to give you an idea of what we've been robbed of by Gary Bettman and the NHL owners, those are the people I blame because I know the players wanted to be there. Austin Matthews, Jack Eichel, Joe Pavelski, Ryan Kessler. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are your centers for Team USA. On the left wing, Johnny Gaudreau, okay. James Van Riemsdyk, Max Pacioretty, and Brandon Saad. Patrick Kane on the right wing, Phil Kessel on the right wing, Blake Wheeler on the right wing on the third line, and TJ Oshie. These are just the projected rosters, by the way, from ESPN.com. TJ Oshie is your 4th line right winger. So your 4th line is Saad, Kessler, Oshie. Your 3rd line, Pacioretty, Pavelski, Wheeler. Wow. A nice looking Team USA for the theoretical Olympic hockey tournament that'll never happen. You'd have Suter and Trouba as your first pairing, Werenski and Seth Jones, your Columbus Blue Jackets second pairing, Cam Fowler and Ryan McDonough as your third pairing, Corey Schneider in goal. That's a nice looking team. Dylan Larkin, JT Miller, Shane Goss to spare, Kevin Shattenkirk as your extras, and a whole bunch of really good players miss out on Team USA. Now we get to Canada, the team that would win this theoretical tournament, and that is line 1, Sidney Crosby. We'll start with the centers, actually, like we did before. Crosby, McDavid, Tavares, Taves. Joe Thornton finally misses out. Left wing, Marchand, Hall, Stamkos. Sorry, Stamkos, you're going to have to play on the wing. Jamie Benn is your 4th left winger. On the right wing, Bergeron, another center on the wing. Scheifele, another center on the wing. McKinnon, another center on the wing. And Sagan, another center on the wing. So your first line is Marchand, Crosby, Bergeron. Okay. Second line, Taylor Hall, Connor McDavid, Mark Scheifele, Hall and McDavid together. Something that we never got a chance to see in Edmonton. Stamkos, Tavares, McKinnon as your third line. Are you kidding me? And your 4th line, this is your shutdown line. Jamie Benn, Jonathan Taves, and Tyler Sagan. On the blue line, Duncan Keith and Shea Weber on your top pair. Mark-Edward Vlasic, Drew Doughty as your second pair. And ESPN has Morgan Riley there with Alex Pietrangelo as your third pair. Carey Price in goal. And your extras are Logan Couture, Sean Couturier, PK Subban, and Brent Burns, your reigning Norris Trophy winner. So just to give you an idea of what we're not going to get to see. We could go into more detail, but you can check out the article at ESPN.com. Sweden's got a real nice looking team. How about Philip Forsberg, Nicholas Backstrom, and Victor Arvidsson as your number 1 line? Not too shabby. And it's such a shame. I mean, wouldn't that be something to look forward to? I know no matter where you are, you don't want to hear me complain about the weather. It's very cold in Montreal. We've gotten a lot of snow, but I know the entire eastern seaboard has been hammered. I mean, hell, Florida's had a whole bunch of snow. Everybody's got bad weather. I mean, in LA, it's cold right now. It's just cold everywhere.
1 minute.
It would be a nice relief, wouldn't it, from the cold if we had an Olympic hockey tournament to look forward to in the month of February? The dog days. It's the dog days of winter, right? August, dog days of summer, dog days of winter. It's February, man. The worst month. The shortest, but somehow worst month on the calendar. So, yeah, get the full list at ESPN.com under the NHL tab. It's been great to see what Greg Wyshynski, Emily Kaplan, and others have done with the ESPN NHL department. Coming up next, it's the second hour of the show. We'll start off by talking about the very disappointing Chicago Blackhawks. Tracey Myers is going to be joining us from NHL.com, based in Chicago. Vegas went through, beat the Hawks at the United Center last night, and Jeff Glass may be coming back to earth. So let's talk Hawks and go around the National Hockey League in just a few moments when hour number 2 of Hockey Primetime gets going here on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio, streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com, Periscope, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live. We'll be back right after this. 3, 2, 1. Hey, welcome back. It's hour number 2. This is Hockey Primetime here on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio, streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. You can find our stream, our video stream on Facebook Live. You get to see what it looks like when I talk. Laura Sava is the producer of the show. She's here as well, enjoying a delicious sugar-free mango and lime gum. I must say, that looks like a C and not a G, but it is gum. My name is Conor McKenna. Nice to be with you until 7 o'clock tonight. And you can also stream old episodes at hockeyprimetime.com. You can find old segments there as well. You might be able to find a few featuring our next guest, although I think the team we were talking about was probably doing a lot better the last time we spoke. Her name is Tracey Myers, based in Chicago, covering the National Hockey League at large and centered there in the Windy City. Tracey Myers, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
I am very good. How are you guys doing tonight?
We're doing great. Thanks for making time for us here. I do appreciate it. And geez, I mean, that was a crazy game yesterday. Following on your Twitter feed, as you get up to go to the elevator, the Vegas Golden Knights tie the game, and what was it? By the time you made it downstairs, they were ahead. It's entertaining, but not good news for the Hawks, losing again in regulation.
No, and the elevator thing. That started a couple years ago, and it just became a thing where whenever I went in the elevator, something happened. Somebody scored. For a while, it was the Blackhawks, but of course, fans always think it was the other team. No, just, especially when Anaheim had 3 goals in 37 seconds during a playoff game a couple years ago. I think 2 of them happened when I was on the elevator.
Wow.
But as far as the Blackhawks, they came off that trip, that long road trip, and they at least felt good about the way it ended, because they played, I thought, one of their best games in New York against the Rangers. They finally played really well against in front of Jeff Glass. From the start, they were just that Blackhawks team that I've watched the last bunch of years up here, 7, 8 years now. So you thought, okay, you come home and see what happens, because they've been very good at home the last week or so before they left town. But well, I'll tell you what, Vegas, I mean, I've seen them plenty on TV, but seeing them in person, incredible team. The speed is just unbelievable, and it was evident from the start, despite the fact that they played the night before in St. Louis. Gerard Gallant said, I think we still got something left in the tank, and he wasn't kidding. But, the Blackhawks, just when you think, okay, they're going to finally gain some traction and get on the right course here, they take another step back.
It's funny. I'm looking at my notes here, and that's what I wrote. Can't turn a corner at the Hawks. It seems like every time something good happens, they're unable to sort of to build on that. And I mean, it's not like it's over, but that's a really, really competitive division they're in. I'm looking at your tweet from practice this morning, and the lines. I'm going to read you the top 6 forwards. Saad, okay, good start. Taves, all right, okay. Yep. Hinostroza, Hartman, Schmaltz, and Kane. I mean, you've got some star power there for sure, but given that those are the top 6 forwards right now, should we really be that surprised that they're struggling a little bit?
I kind of go back and forth on this, because when we all thought, Saad got back here, that was going to be what Jonathan Taves needed to kind of get going. And Saad, outside of the first couple weeks, has not been who we all thought he was going to be. He hasn't been the guy that he was first go around in Chicago, and even a year or 2 in Columbus. So, that whole thing, you've seen Taves the last couple games, he's looked more like himself. And Saad, it's been hit and miss. I will say this in Mr. Vinny Hinostroza's defense, because, he's a young kid and got called up from Rockford not too long ago, but he's been a little spark on that line. His speed and his ability to get to the puck and everything has led to some very good things the last couple of games, and he's kind of earned that for the time being. But I understand what you're saying, is that you've got some youth, you've got guys in Taves and Saad, and Kane's actually been pretty consistent this year, so I can't say much there. But you're missing Anisimov on that second line, and that's usually been something. Ryan Hartman isn't having the year that he had last year when he had almost 20 goals. So it's definitely different, especially when you've looked at some of the combinations that the Blackhawks have had when everything was rolling for a couple of years there.
And, you mentioned Kane, and I guess that was sort of the gamble that the Hawks took when they made that trade. It was that, all right, Jonathan Toews hasn't been the same since Brandon Saad got traded, and we think that Patrick Kane will produce no matter who he plays with, which I guess, has that been proven to be correct? Like, how is the trade, a significant trade, looking to you at this point?
Right now, like I said, considering what Saad has done, when you look at, I think he's got 6 game-winning goals this year, and that looks great on paper to a degree. But then you remember that I think 5 or 6 of those happened in the first 2 weeks of the season. So, there's no doubt that Kane misses Panarin, and that's nothing against any of his other teammates. They just had that tremendous chemistry, and you saw what it could lead to over the last 2 years. So, as far as Kane being able to play with anybody, it's still pretty close. You see him and Schmaltz, they can have that magic together. Him and Anisimov, I think, work very well together because Anisimov just knows what he needs to do. You get to the front of the net where you either get rebounds or you get the puck back to Kane and let him try again. But at the same time, there's no doubt that, to try and supplement your top line, which it really hasn't worked out as consistently as you'd like, you got rid of a very key piece of a second line, which was rolling for 2 straight years.
No kidding. And Panarin is, I guess, a little bit off the pace that he was on. He was a 77, then 74-point guy in the last 2 years in Chicago. And this year he's on pace for probably something a little bit closer to like 65 points, but still a highly productive season. He's on pace for 20 goals. But I guess that's what's going to happen. You're used to and have chemistry with one of the most dynamic players in the National Hockey League in Patrick Kane. There's nobody in Columbus, God bless them. They got a nice roster, but there's nobody like that there. But he's still productive. It's an interesting one. And I guess at the same time, you look at these contracts that Kane and Toews have, and I think the layman, and I'll be the layman in this case, I'll say, I think we've sort of learned that you cannot spend $21 million on 2 players in a cap league and hope to win, even if it is those 2 guys. Is that oversimplifying, or do you think there's something to it?
I am all for simplification whenever it comes to numbers in the cap, so I'm perfectly fine with that. I absolutely understand what you're saying, and you go back to, it's always hindsight, isn't it? You go back to when those contracts were signed, and you look at it, and you saw what they had done up to that point, and you think, oh, great deals, because you knew they were going to get more elsewhere, even though there was no way in hell they were ever going to go anywhere else. That they held back on money that they could have gone and all that. But I guess, you also had to look at how it was going to affect your team, and it was absolutely going to affect your team. Then you throw in the Seabrook contract a year or 2 later, and now that's another 6.5. I can't remember his cap hit. It's up there, but you've got that for another 6 or 7 years. You've got the Anisimov cap hit, which when he's playing, he's very, very good, but he's been hurt quite a bit. This is the 2nd straight year where he's been out with a pretty decent injury. So there's a couple contracts that you can look at. And as far as Toews and Kane, I understand what you're saying. That's a hell of a lot of money to give just 2 guys on a team, regardless of what they've done for you. And it's easy to say that right now, but it is the cap, and the Blackhawks have always had, fun with it. I've learned more about the cap with this team than any other team I possibly could have covered. But it's just one of those things that they're always going to have cap issues. And stuff like this is part of it. Yeah,
and you mentioned the Seabrook contract. It's shade under $7 million, and it's going. He's signed through his age 39 season at a pretty big number. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but did something happen? Like they expected the cap to go up, and it didn't on the heels of that of those twin contracts for Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews. Did something like that happen?
It might have been, although, Bowman has always preached to us every year that, they try not to expect too much, to try not to, I know what I'm trying to say here. They always try and guess maybe on the low side, I guess is what I'm saying. Whether that happened at that point or not, I don't know. I'm trying to remember who else they had around that time that they had contracts or everything, but I don't know if that, how much that truly factored in terms of, if they thought that there was going to be more room, but again, Taves and Kane were going to command quite a bit, and they actually took less than they probably could have. So, was it an overcalculation? I don't know. But, yeah, it's, once again, here we are with a lot of cap issues.
Yeah, and look, at the same time, it's the fact that there's two of them. It's one thing to have one guy at 10.5. It's another to have two. It's amazing. I don't know why it's sort of shocking to me that I look and I see that Duncan Keith is 34 years old, but Duncan Keith is 34 years old. Like, that makes me feel old. I remember when he was coming up. And I guess it's sort of inevitable, right? I know that a lot's been made of sort of dry runs for him and not scoring, which isn't what he's necessarily there to do. But is the fact that he's not as productive as he once was, in your eyes, I mean, is that simply a byproduct of age?
I don't know if it's maybe. I think it's a combination. It might not just be with a lot of these guys. I don't think it's just age. Look at the miles that they have on them. Look at the amount of hockey that they've played. You look at Duncan Keith specifically, and then the minutes that he still logs per game, and all those years where he was playing a ton of minutes, and then this team was going Western Conference Final, Stanley Cup, for 3 straight years. Even when he started off, it was Western Conference Final, Cup, then 2 years first round exits, and then it started back up again. So, that's a lot when you put on a player. This is a sport that I don't care how good you are. I don't care how injury free you've been or what have you. It eventually takes its toll. That said, I'm still impressed with what he's able to do. But yeah, you've always looked to him for a couple goals a season, and the fact that he has none. Last night it really looked like he was even getting sick of having that 0, because there were a couple of chances that you thought, okay, this has got to be it. But it's definitely kind of strange not to see any goals with him. But, you think of all the miles that he's logged with this team. And yeah, you wonder, I mean, none of these guys, for as much as we tag them as warriors and these guys who just can do so much, their athleticism is just so incredible. They're still human. And eventually it catches up with all of us, especially when you play at that high of a level.
I'm talking with Tracey Myers. She's with NHL.com, based in Chicago. The Blackhawks are currently in the basement of the Central Division in 7th place. The Avalanche, Tracey, are ahead of the Hawks. And they've won 4. I mean, Colorado's won 4 games in a row, but what a division it is, right? I mean, we saw the Stars load up in the offseason. The Predators made some significant moves to improve a team that was 2 wins away from a Stanley Cup last year. The Jets were young and good and appear to have gotten better. The Blues are the Blues, year in, year out. They do what they do. So who do you think, for your money, who is, and I know the Jets are on top of the division right now, but who do you think's the best team in the Central?
I mean, Nashville, despite, they've had some key injuries. They just lost Forsberg. This is where I really want to see how this affects them. That's a big one. Although, it's not the first time this year that they've, been without a key player for a little bit. I think it's between them and St. Louis, I think. And St. Louis is another one that I've really been, it comes with a bit of an asterisk. I've been really impressed with what they've been able to do despite losing what they've lost. I was down there in the middle of December when they were playing the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they were without Jay Bouwmeester that night. I'm trying to think of who else they were out. They were out like 2 or 3 guys, at least 2 of their defensemen. And I apologize for blanking on who I'm missing there, but I think at the time Mike Gill was saying, we've had about a week healthy, and that really wasn't an exaggeration. So for what they've been able to do despite all that, now I know they lost again today to Philadelphia, but I think they had 3-game winning streak before that. So been really impressed with what some of these teams have been able to do despite the fact that they've been missing some key players.
And they've played a lot of games too, more than any team in the NHL. The Blues have, with 44 games under their belts. It's funny. I always thought that they were going to have to slay the Blackhawks dragon at some point if they wanted to get over the top, but they never had to do it, and it doesn't look like they're going to have to do it this year. Tracey, I'll let you get to it. Enjoy your Saturday night with no game to cover, and tomorrow's afternoon game. Cheers.
Cheers. Have a wonderful evening.
That is Tracey Myers, NHL.com in Chicago, where it's also cold. It's cold everywhere. There's no place in our listening range, at least I don't think so, in North America, where it is not currently colder than it normally is at this time. And some places just like super abnormally cold. A friend of mine was he was in Miami the other day. He's telling me it's 10 degrees Celsius, which is, honestly, I don't even know. I'm so bad with this, and I apologize. But it was 10 Celsius, which is not swimming weather. And he's like, there's people swimming in the pool next door, tourists, because no local is swimming in 10-degree weather. But you know, these tourists are fanatics. I remember going to Cuba a couple of years ago for a little visit and talking to some of the people who live there. You know, this was in the month of January. We're there, and they think we're lunatic fanatics for swimming in the ocean in the month of January in Cuba. They would never do it. Everybody in Cuba goes to the beach in the summertime. It's July and August. That's when Cubans go swimming, when nobody wants to visit the country because it's warm wherever they're from. So yeah, 10 Celsius. Thank you, Laura Sabas. 50 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't swim in 50-degree weather. Are you out of your mind? Anyway, at least most people who aren't in the Polar Bear Club don't. Coming up next, it's deja vu all over again. The Washington Capitals in first place. Alexander Ovechkin's on pace for 50 goals. We all knew this was going to happen, didn't we? Oh, I don't know about that. Who would have thought? And there's another example. Are the Capitals going to go into the playoffs this year and not have to face the Pittsburgh Penguins? Could this be just what the doctor ordered for them to finally reach the promised land? We'll talk to Stephen Whyno of the Associated Press. He's based in D.C. He'll be joining us next. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. Hey, welcome back. This is Hockey Primetime. My name is Conor McKenna. Nice to be with you on this lovely Saturday evening, or perhaps you're listening to our podcast at hockeyprimetime.com. Either way, I wish you the best. Happy New Year to everybody. Yada, yada, yada. Another guy who doesn't have a game to cover tonight, at least not an NHL game to cover tonight, is our next guest. His name is Stephen Whyno. He's based in D.C., covering the Washington Capitals in the DC sports world. and a guy who gets around a little bit and doesn't strictly cover stuff in BC. The guy's all over the place. His name is Stephen Whyno of the Associated Press. Stephen, welcome back. How you doing, bud?
I'm good. Connor, how are you?
I'm well, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
Thank you. So, Stephen, the Capitals are in first. Alexander Ovechkin is on pace for 50 goals. This is it. This is what happens. It seems like every single year. I don't know. I thought maybe this year might be different. They lost a lot of guys this offseason, but here they are in probably the most competitive division in the NHL. They're doing it again. It's amazing.
Yeah, and the high-end talent is what's doing this for the Capitals right now. And it's Alex Ovechkin and Nicholas Backstrom and Evgeny Kuznetsov. TJ Oshie's been struggling a little bit. But those guys, along with Braden Holtby, have been the reason why the Capitals are in first place in this really absurd Metropolitan Division. And you consider how different Alex Ovechkin's game has been from this year to last year. He already has more even-strength goals through 41 games than he did through all 82 a year ago.
Wow.
Braden Holtby's numbers aren't as strong as a year ago. But he's still saving them games. And when they were struggling earlier in the year to kind of get their act together with a lot of new guys and new pieces, he was the one responsible for a lot of their points. And when you got Ovechkin scoring at even strength the way he does right now, and pumping it in on the power play where we all know he can score, and a lot of times teams and goaltenders can't stop him, it's a dangerous combination for opponents, and something that can last here ideally for them through the playoffs.
Wasn't that amazing what Ovechkin did against the Hurricanes the other day, scoring that tying goal late, and then sort of a vintage Ovechkin type goal to win it in overtime? I don't know. It's almost amazing to me that 32 is not 42, but just the fact that he's still performing at such a high level when, what was it, 5 years ago, and maybe even before that, there were people that were writing him off. It's amazing to see, isn't it?
Yeah, and he did make adjustments that were necessary along the way. Because there were points where it was clear that he was a one-dimensional kind of very predictable player back in that 2011, 2012 range. But his career lows at that point in goals were 32, 33. It wasn't like he sank to a terrible season. A bad season for Alex Ovechkin was 30 goals. And getting Adam Oates moving to the left way, to the right wing for a year and a half, and then getting Barry Trotz, he's gotten kind of at least enough spark and changes to his game, and this year maybe caring a little bit more about scoring, whereas a year ago the point was, let's reduce your ice time, let's get you ready for the playoffs. That it's fascinating that Alex Ovechkin, you're right, at 32 shouldn't be doing this, but he's doing it, and would be the fifth oldest player in NHL history to reach 50 goals. At the Johnny Busick, the Johnny Busick, Bobby Hull, Phil Esposito, and Jaromir Jagr are the only other guys at 32 or older to reach 50 goals, which is incredible that he's even on this pace right now.
And meanwhile, this only just occurred to me, and I'm sure that you've heard this race before, but with the Penguins struggling the way that they have, and I know that they beat the Islanders, they shut out the Islanders yesterday, but they've got injury concerns. They've got Matt Murray not really doing what they hoped he would do, and there's a variety of reasons that we don't need to get into about why the Penguins are where they are right now, but I wonder what a tantalizing prospect this would be to Alex Ovechkin and the Capitals, that there is a chance this year that the Penguins don't make the playoffs at all. So they could slay their dragon without even having to slay their dragon. You know what I mean?
Now, let me give you the two very different ends of the spectrum here. Number one would be the Penguins don't make the playoffs or cross over and play the Tampa Bay Lightning, which, as good as the Penguins have been in previous year's playoffs, I don't think they match up to Tampa this year. I don't think anyone beats Tampa Bay in the Eastern Conference, notwithstanding. But to be able to then have the possibility, not that there's anything against these teams, but Carolina, New Jersey, Columbus, the Islanders, the Rangers, the Flyers, any of those teams, to have to go through those two teams just to get to the conference final, which is the hill that the Capitals haven't been able to climb yet. To be able to get over the hump by facing those teams, not the Penguins, not the Lightning, not the Maple Leafs, would be a good road for Washington. And the other road would be, what if the Penguins get in as the first wild card and you got to play them in the first round? Not just the second round, but the first round. And this is not the Penguins team of years past. There's no Kunis. There's no Daly. There's no Fleury. There's a lot of those same guys who have tortured the Capitals over the years who aren't there. But it's not the team the Capitals really, frankly, or the Lightning want to see in the first round would be Crosby, Malkin, Kessel, and those guys in the first round. But you could either have a very tough opening series for the Capitals or a clear path at least to get to the Lightning in the Eastern Finals.
Do you think? I wonder that, because I feel like now I can pretend to put myself in the skates of a professional hockey player, but of course, I mean, I don't know what it's like, but I'd wonder, and I'm sure, beggars can't be choosers and all the rest, but there must be at least a part of these guys that sort of wants to beat the Penguins in the playoffs, right? Like, especially the long-serving guys, the Ovechkins and Backstroms and Carlsons of the world, that probably do want to exercise their demon in a way, don't you think?
I think they do, but if the Penguins were not there and they win the Stanley Cup, no one's going to say, "Oh, well, this is hollow because we didn't beat Pittsburgh." If they get the Penguins, that's going to be the talk. It's going to be, here's another chance to exercise the demons. But that was the talk last spring too. That was every other chance of franchise history that the Capitals had to beat the Penguins and hadn't been able to do it, even from 2009. 15 and 2015, and not being able to beat them in those series and losing 7 and 6, and not getting a chance to really, they didn't really show up in this Game 7 last year. But I don't think it would hurt the Capitals if the Penguins weren't in their way immediately and not have to worry about even thinking about past playoff failures against them.
The Washington Capitals are in first. They're not playing tonight. They are back in action tomorrow. We're talking Capitals with Stephen Whyno. He's with the Associated Press, based in D.C. And meanwhile, they've got, and you mentioned the sort of the marquee guys, Ovechkin, Holtby, Backstrom, but Holtby, once again, I mean, this guy just continues to sort of get the job done, although I don't know if he gets the credit that he deserves, and maybe that's because there are guys like Carey Price, and now Andrei Vasilevsky's getting a ton of attention. There's goalies in the division like Corey Schneider, who's maybe getting a little more credit these days as well with the Devils, although they've lost 4 games in a row. But I do wonder what your perspective is covering this guy and having covered him for quite a while. Is Braden Holtby properly appreciated for what he is, and that is really one of the best goalies in hockey?
Are you judging by past Vezina Trophy votes? Yes, he is. And you have to put him in the discussion of the top 3 or 4 goaltenders in the league from year to year. And this has been the case for the past several seasons now, and it's the case again this year. You have a guy like Carey Price who had the injury season. Devin Dubnyk, and a little bit of injury now in a down season. Andrei Vasilevsky finally getting a chance to start. Took a Rask playing better than he had in the past couple of years. There has not been someone who's been as consistently great as Braden Holtby in the NHL over the past few years. And there's a reason he was the Vezina winner, the Vezina finalist last year. And I would have to think he'd be a Vezina finalist again this year. You have to throw Jonathan Quick in there with the way he's playing, and certainly Andrei Vasilevsky would be the front runner right now. But I do think he's properly appreciated because you see his numbers year to year, and he's one of the best in the game, and it's just he doesn't want the attention. So I think he's okay with not being numero uno all the time, and people thinking about him like Carey Price. But he is, without a doubt, the number one reason this team didn't fall further into a hole over the first month and a half of the season. They played 8 of their first 12 games on the road, and we're integrating a lot of new players, and didn't have the Marcus Johanssons, the Connor Lawson, Nate Schmidt, Justin Williams, go down the list. And Braden Holtby has been kind of the glue guy for this team, that he can steal games and steal points for the Capitals, and he could be the reason you win a 5-4 high-scoring game because he makes the save at the right time. And what he didn't do in the playoffs last year, early in that series against Pittsburgh, it hurt them very much. It's one of the reasons the Capitals lost. But if he is on top of his game, there's nothing the Capitals can't do in terms of the regular season and the playoffs.
I remember the Capitals raised some eyebrows when they took Tom Wilson in the first round back in 2012. But you mentioned all those departures, and there was the injury to Andrei Burakovsky as well. Is he sort of making, and has he sort of taken that next step in his career? I believe the team has said before they sort of envisioned this guy as a top 6 forward. Another thing that I raised my eyebrows when I heard, but he's having a good year. He's close to a career high in goals, and really has done well, it seems, filling the void created by the departures of guys like William Johansson and Burakovsky.
Yeah, and when George McPhee drafted Tom Wilson 16th overall, the name that was brought up was Milan Lucic, and I don't think Tom Wilson's to that point. I don't know if he'll ever be to that point, but he's still a young man in his career, and I think he has made that step. When you take him in the middle of the first round, the Capitals saw him as a 2-3, a second line or a third line right wing, but a big guy who could create space and be able to add a little bit of offense as well. And what has been what Barry Trotz has the way Barry Trotz has used Tom Wilson this year in really with Alex Ovechkin and Nicholas Backstrom at times to be the guy to put the puck in the net if someone's going to cover Alex Ovechkin, and to be the guy who's the beneficiary of passes from Evgeny Kuznetsov or Lars Eller even, or Nicholas Backstrom, that he's been able to do that. And a couple of years ago when the Capitals lost to the Penguins in the second round, it was, how do you replace Joel Ward? And Brian McClellan said, we want Tom Wilson to become a Joel Ward. And I don't know if he's that. He's not stand in front of the net kind of guy, but he is a bruiser. He is a poor man's Milan Lucic sort of player, where he can throw the body around, sometimes kind of teetering on the edge, but a guy who can put the puck in the net and be an offensive player to where you can then shuffle guys down the lineup, Andre Burakovsky, Devontae Smith-Pelly, Alex Chason, those kind of guys who you really don't want playing top six if you don't have to, and you don't have injuries on your team. But Tom Wilson has shown the ability, and it's not easy, as we've seen with Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid, to play with star players. But Tom Wilson is the kind of player that his game is so different than Alex Ovechkin and Nicholas Backstrom that it made him a great fit on right wing there.
And before I let you go, do you think John Carlson signs a contract before July 1, or does he go out there and test the waters?
I think they resign him, and I don't think they have a choice. There's not really – Madison Valley is a nice young player who can play the right side. Matt Niskanen is under contract for a few more years, but there's not really a replacement for John Carlson and the kind of do-everything abilities that he has. And it's going to cost the Capitals probably in the neighborhood of $7 million a year on an 8-year contract. It's going to be a tough pill to swallow for the AAV and for how long the deal is going to have to be. But when you think about how short the window is to win a championship in Alex Ovechkin's prime, you cannot let a guy like John Carlson go. And maybe 2 months ago you asked me this question. I think it's more like a Kevin Shattenkirk situation with the Blues last year, and the Capitals were to trade him or at least let him walk. And at this point, I don't think they can afford to let him walk. I think John Carlson's on this team next year and for many, many years to come.
All right. Hey, Steven, thanks for your time, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Connor. Talk to you soon.
There's Stephen Whyno, Associated Press in D.C. I'm Conor McKenna, Hockey Primetime in Montreal. No game for the Canadians tonight either, and they are facing the Vancouver Canucks tomorrow. The Canucks are in town for hometown hockey. Oh, yeah, don't you know, hometown hockey. Should be a lot of fun there on Sunday night. That's my Canadian hometown hockey voice. So, yeah, no game tonight. I don't know what I'm going to do. I guess I'm going to have to watch NFL playoff football. My girlfriend will be thrilled to hear it. Coming up next, we're talking Vancouver Canucks. Mike Halford of The Athletic and TSN 1040 out there in Vancouver. We'll take a look at the Canucks and go around the league, specifically the Western Conference with Mike. That's what's coming up next. This is Hockey Prime Time here on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com.
All right, Mike's there.
Again, the need you very deep. The secrets that you keep are ever ready. Are you ready?
3, 2, 1. Hey, welcome back. This is Hockey Primetime here on SiriusXM, NHL Network Radio, and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. How you doing on this Saturday evening? It's it's game night. We got a bunch of games on tap, and a bunch more tomorrow. We got some early ones tomorrow, but 7 more games to go. 2 games in the books already in the National Hockey League today. Tomorrow night, the Vancouver Canucks are at the Bell Center to take on the Montreal Canadiens. Damn, is it cold here in Montreal. Minus 34 degrees with the wind chill. I think that's what we're looking at right now. It's like in real temperature, it's still like minus 22 or something like that. It's the kind of weather that you just you go out once and get the stuff you need and then do not leave the house again until you absolutely have to do it. Yeah, minus 22 feels like minus 35 right now. That's bad. I bet you it's less bad in Vancouver, although I'm sure it's probably colder than it should be there as well. That's what's going on everywhere. Mike Halford is with The Athletic in Vancouver. He's also with TSN 1040, and he's with us here on the show right now. Mike, how you doing?
Good, Connor. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for making time for us here today. How cold is it in Vancouver?
It's fine, actually.
Oh.
I feel bad for the rest of Canada. Yeah, we're not submerged in this cold snap that the rest of Eastern Canada is. It's raining, as per usual, which is good because we're staying par for the course there. Nothing changes. But yeah, everything else is pretty moderate. I feel lucky to just be wet and not be freezing cold.
All right, good. Well, I'm glad to hear it, and yeah, I'm a little bit jealous. I really am. Although I love it out there in British Columbia. It's the most beautiful province, I think, in this country, at least the most beautiful one that I've been lucky enough to go to. You guys have everything out there. You've got the mountains, you've got the ocean, you've got the island, the coast, and inland. I mean, it's the best. So I hope you're enjoying it out there, sir. Mike, I wanted to start here before we get into talking about the Canucks. What is your feeling on that Swedish kid tossing the medal into the crowd, the silver medal into the crowd, after, well, you can't say winning, after losing the gold medal and getting a silver medal? What do you think about him tossing it into the crowd?
Right, so you just hit the key. You hit the nail on the head there. They lost. I mean, that's the thing. Is you're getting. I've got several problems with the World Series on the whole. This is one of them. Is that you're putting 17, 18, 19-year-old kids on really big platforms. Possibly a little bit too big of a platform, and I think that's maybe what we saw in Buffalo this year, that maybe the hype doesn't really match up to what's on the ice. Because the reality is that these kids are going to make mistakes. That's what makes the tournament so thrilling, is that the big comebacks and the major upsets and a lot of the things that you love about the tournament are based on the fact that it's kids that aren't really there physically and mentally and trying to do, really big things on a really big stage with, a lot of different people analyzing what they're doing. I mean, if you look at what Anderson did, I mean, if you want to take it from a purely European perspective, I've seen numerous different people in European football and soccer. That's almost a tradition, is when they lose, they throw their medal into the crowd. And it's not meant to be a sign of disrespect. It's that they are genuinely pissed off at the fact that they have not won anything. They lost that game, and they've been handed, for lack of a better term, a participation medal. So I get that people might have been offended, and they might have thought that it was poor sportsmanship, but I would rather see a kid genuinely emotionally invested and displaying that, because that's kind of what this tournament at the end is all about. It's about they're out there and they are fully invested emotionally, physically, mentally, and when it doesn't go their way, I would love to see the actual truthful part of that, rather than someone trying to cover up the fact that they're genuinely pissed off. So that's, in a very roundabout way, I don't have a problem with what transpired yesterday.
And I would think about it too, that the silver medal is a literal reminder of the biggest moment, the biggest game of your life to date, and you lost. So every time you look at it, it's right. I mean, it's, if you think about it from that perspective, it makes
exactly what it is. It's a memento that you lost.
Right. Yeah. Like, I don't know.
And I can understand why someone doesn't want to hold on to it. I mean, this isn't like going to the Olympics and finishing second in figure skating, where you didn't necessarily lose because you won that place on the podium. But when you're to go, I mean, it's the same thing at the Olympics when hockey's always in any international competition where there's a bronze medal game. those games are always inevitably a gigantic letdown because no one's really that emotionally invested in playing for third and playing for a medal. It's gold or bust. And I'm sorry if this is not necessarily the way that everyone looks at this, but my feeling is that when you're in a tournament like that and you're in a one-game winner-take-all, when you don't take all, you take nothing.
Yeah, and I think that's totally fine. And I completely agree with what you're saying. In an individual sport, I mean, you know, in the bobsled, if you have the second best run, I mean, for sure. But if it's a team sport and there's a gold medal game and you don't win, nobody wants that medal. I totally get it. All right, let's move on. I wanted to ask you about the Canucks, who, you know, here in Montreal, the Canadiens have had this just sort of catastrophic season. But I think sort of what's going to happen and what almost makes it that much worse is that, well, there's almost 0% chance they're going to make the playoffs, but they've got Carey Price, so they'll probably go on a run. In the conference, the Sabres are going to be worse than them. The Senators are going to be worse than them. And the other thing is there's no real bright spots for this team. Any fan base knows that even in a losing season, you can find silver linings. You can find things to get excited about. And I think in Vancouver, they have that. They got off to kind of a surprisingly good start, and I know they've come down to earth, and now the playoffs are essentially out of the question for them. They actually have a very similar record to Montreal, but there's bright spots, isn't there? So I was starting with Brock Besser.
Yeah, almost. I don't want to say it starts and ends with Brock Besser, but at this stage thing with this season, it really does. Look, when we knew that they had something special last year, because the way that he broke in at the tail end of his season in North Dakota and turned pro and had that debut in his hometown of Minnesota, and there were all those great narratives, but he also showed that he had a real knack for scoring. But honestly, no one had any sort of idea that this was going to be his rookie campaign, to be a point-a-game player, to have 21 goals, 37 games, to be able to possibly flirt with 40 goals in a rookie campaign. I mean, honestly, like, it's not out of the realm of possibility right now that he has something somewhat similar to Austin Matthews' rookie here in Toronto. I could see him, if things go as they have, and it doesn't show any signs of slowing down, finishing with 35 to 40 goals and winning the Calder Trophy. Those are not out of the realm of possibility options for him right now. And that is a huge shot in the arm to an organization that has spent the last 2 years wallowing. I mean, the last 2 years have been dreadful. They've been littered with losses and no bright spots whatsoever. This is the most exciting rookie and the most exciting goal scorer Vancouver's had since Pavel Bure, and that was when Bure broke in. He won the Calder in '92, so you're looking upwards of 25 years until you've seen something like this. So it's huge for the market, it's huge for the team, and it has given everyone a lot of optimism. And it's almost kind of negated the fact that on December 5th, they shut out Carolina 3-0. They moved to, I think it was 14-10-4 in the Pacific Division. They were third in the Pacific. They were in a playoff spot. That's a month ago almost exactly. It was January 6th now. Since then, they've absolutely cratered. They've gone 2-9-1. The goaltending's been bad. Injuries have hit, and they've lost a lot of games. But people don't see him as upset as previous years. They're okay, and that's all got pretty much everything to do with Brock Besser.
How important do you think the next 6 weeks or so are at the lead up and the trading deadline, with the franchise being in the situation that they're in? I know they've got a couple of pieces, namely Erik Erlendsson and Thomas Vanek, who could be on the move. How big of a stretch is this for the Canucks?
Yeah, it's very significant. And the way that it's played out lately, in a very odd way, it's really sort of appealed to the quote-unquote Team Tank faction in Vancouver, which is large, because everyone in this market that can see trends around the NHL knows that their best-case scenario is to finish as worst as possible in the standings and try and get as best of a shot as Rasmus Dahlin as you can. Because this team, quite clearly, is not good enough to make the playoffs. And if by some amazing stroke of fate they did, they'd be nowhere close to competing for a cup. They're just not good enough yet. The guys that are going to be good are too young and aren't there yet. And the veterans that they've got are on their way out. So they're and their goaltending stinks. It's been absolutely horrible the last 4 or 5 weeks. So right now, what you're looking at is up to the trade deadline, everyone's happy with the way this is going because it fully puts this team in seller mode. Not that they weren't going to be, but I think if they were flirting with a playoff spot, there might be some hesitation to maintain the status quo to try and have a push, because this team desperately wants to play meaningful games in February and March. And I don't think it's going to happen this year. And this recent stretch has kind of helped that move along. So I think now everyone's focused, and I'm going to write about this for The Athletic this week, actually. The Branson's trade seems almost inevitable at this point.
I don't think they're going to bring him back as a free agent. I think all signs point to them just cutting ties and saying this was an experiment that failed. And then with Vanek, I think they just take the bar from last year. I believe Ken Holland got a third-round pick and Dylan McElrath to get him in exchange with Florida. So that's the bar. So Benning and Trevor Linden's goal now is to try and, out-jump that bar and get a better option on the table. And that has fans excited here because the trade deadline now is fully about selling, and I think a lot of people think that's the thing.
We're talking to Mike Halford. You can read his work at The Athletic, theathletic.com. You subscribe in any market. You get access to every market, and you can listen to him on TSN 1040 as well. Jim Benning, we have this happening again in Montreal. I guess Montreal, I think, maybe is a couple of years sort of behind where Vancouver is in terms of having what might have been arguably at least an Eastern Conference championship caliber roster, and now here they are sort of languishing closer to last place than first. And one of the questions we're asking here is Marc Bergevin the guy to get the Canadiens out of the mess that he's created? Given that the Canucks are sort of ahead of, or a year or two sort of ahead of that curve after having what was clearly a championship roster, or a championship caliber roster, I should say, a couple of years ago. Jim Benning, I mean, is this the guy who is going to get to guide the Vancouver Canucks back to wherever it is they're going?
I don't think so. I don't think Jim Benning's going to be around beyond this year, to be perfectly honest. He's in the last year of his contract. He's been working this entire season without an extension. The owner, Francesco Aquilini, went public I guess it was about 6-8 weeks ago, saying that they were contemplating and discussing the idea of an extension, but it's gone dead silent since then. Midweek, Trevor Linden was asked about Benning's future, and he sort of punted on the question. And then they were asked, well, is it not creating a weird dynamic that a lame duck GM is going into this trade deadline? Does that not create a dynamic where maybe he's potentially, quote-unquote, GMing for his job?
Go to break.
Linden said that he trusted Benning and he liked the job that he had done, but no sort of vote of confidence beyond that. You know what? I think this organization is waiting to see what shakes loose this summer. Because if you look around the NHL, Ken Holland's deal is up in Detroit. Brian McClellan's deal is reportedly up in Washington. Chuck Fletcher is up in Minnesota. There could be a whole lot of movement around the league with regards to the GM position. And it would kind of behoove the organization to see what happens. I mean, are they going to be interested in a guy like Ken Holland? I mean, he's from British Columbia. He's got a long history. He might be done in Detroit. I think they're just kind of biding their time right now. I think Doug Armstrong would have definitely been in that mix had he not recently re-signed in St. Louis. So I don't think it's necessarily a condemnation of Benning, although he hasn't been terrific. I do think this is just about an organization that wants to see what else is out there, maybe get a different type of GM, maybe a guy that's a little bit more seasoned in that role. Because remember, this stint in Vancouver is the first time Benning has ever been a GM. So I think there's a lot of different balls in the air with regards to what they might do. But at the end of the day, I if it was a personal opinion thing, which we're talking about my personal opinion, I don't think he'll be back.
Well, it's going to be fun to watch. It's an interesting situation that they're in out there in Vancouver. I hope it's fun. I hope it's entertaining. I hope they give you lots of fodder for talk radio and for your work with The Athletic. And Mike Halford, thank you for your time. Happy New Year, dude.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Take care.
That's Mike Halford. I'm Conor McKenna. This is Hockey Primetime. We're back to wrap things up right after this. Is anyone going to slow down the Vegas Golden Knights? I'm still waiting for this juggernaut to slow down. And we'll talk a little bit about that next as we wrap things up on Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM, NHL Network Radio, and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. It's 3, 2, 1. Hey, welcome back. This is Hockey Primetime. I'm Conor McKenna. Nice to be with you for the last couple of minutes of the show. You know, if you're like me, and if you've been listening to the show, you know that I've said it before, and I'll say it again, although I don't know, at some point I'm going to have to stop, that I'm not buying what Vegas is selling. That I love the story. It's an amazing story. I mean, what a story the Vegas Golden Knights are. It was my story of the year in our year-ending show a couple of weeks back. Or not even, I guess that was last week. Yeah, whatever. I don't know what day it is. No big deal. But they just keep doing it. You know, I'm looking at the games this week. Okay, they're facing Nashville. This is a good Nashville team, although some might suggest the underlying numbers would suggest that maybe Nashville's playing a little bit over their heads or had been. But what happens? Nashville goes into Vegas. Boom. Shutout by the Golden Knights. Marc-Andre Fleury, I believe, is the one who got the shutout. And Vegas beats them. I think it was 3-0 that game. What happens yesterday? They're losing to Chicago. And I know that, you know, these are not your grandfathers. That's probably not the correct terminology. These are not the Hawks of 2 or 3 years ago, but they're still the Chicago Blackhawks. It's still United Center. They're down 4-3 in the third period. Bang, bang. They score 2 goals and win the game. And at some point, you got to tip your hat to the Vegas Golden Knights. And maybe I'm just, you know, being a child of expansion in the NHL. I'm 35 years old, so I remember when I was a kid, the Ottawa Senators, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Florida Panthers, and on we go here as far as expansion teams go. And I try to remember. I mean, I guess there was Atlanta, but the one thing they all had in common was that they were terrible. And I know that they say they tweaked the expansion draft and they did it in such a way that they felt that Vegas was going to be competitive right away, right? But what did all of us say when we heard that? We laughed. It was a joke. Yeah, Vegas is going to be competitive. And then we saw who they took in the expansion draft. I don't think anybody looked at the roster on paper and said, oh, yeah, they're going to be good. Not only are they good, they're leading their division. They're the top team in the Western Conference, and it's January 6th. It's completely and totally unlike anything that any of us have ever seen before with an expansion team, I believe, in any sport. You know, what's the best expansion team in history? I honestly, I couldn't tell you. I mean, in my lifetime, every expansion team I can remember was awful. And here they are, proving that guys like me wrong night in, night out. They've got a great coach. I think there's something to be said for that sort of that mentality that a bunch of guys on an expansion roster would have, which is nobody wanted us. Let's prove them wrong. I think there's something to that. There's probably something to teams coming into Vegas and partying the night before games, and maybe that helps them a little bit. But what are they? They're like 18-3-1 at home. It's insane. Anyway, just a great story. And I can't give those guys enough credit. I think it's great, and especially given what happened in Vegas just before the season started. It's a really, really nice little story. Great for the game. It's great for the game. It's good for the NHL. So, yeah, it feels like a little bit of a changing of the guard, though, in the NHL, doesn't it? I mean, if Vegas is going to make it, somebody's not. And it seems very likely, if not possible, that Chicago and Pittsburgh are both going to miss out on the playoffs this year, although I'm not counting out the Penguins just yet. Thank you to Rob Conway, our technical producer. Thank you to Laura Saba for producing the show, our executive producer, Sam Wu, and everybody for tuning in and listening. I appreciate it. This has been Hockey Primetime. Enjoy the games tonight, and I can't wait. I'm already looking forward. I'm setting my watch to talk to you again next week. Have a great night, and enjoy the rest of the weekend.